If you want to turn your Bible to Judges chapter 17, 2 weeks ago we got done telling the story of Samson, and he was preceded by all of the other judges, and we saw a deterioration of the quality of people and the quality of leadership throughout the book. God uses the stories of the judges throughout this book to kind of demonstrate as an example, as a representative example of the rest of society in Israel, I believe. As the stories of the judges deteriorate and their situations kind of head downhill, so does the rest of the nation. And we got done with the last judge, like I said last week. The story of Samson is kind of a not a real pleasant story. I mean, Samson himself, God did amazing things. He was supposedly dedicated to God throughout his life from being a Nazirite. Of course, we see in reality he wasn't dedicated at all to God. God gave him amazing strength, amazing gifts to do what he needed to do, and he kind of squandered them. And while his physical strength was outstanding in every other area, he was kind of a nothing. He had no real leadership. He had no real integrity. He had no real character. He was just a strong guy out to get revenge on everybody who did him wrong in his mind. And that's, as I said, it's a sad story as we see that develop. And we ended up, I believe last week, really on kind of this slide here, I said, try to remember what life should have been like and society should have been like as God designed it under his law, and compare that to what we see here by the end of Samson's story. And there's a lot of difference between the two. Well, the book of Judges ends up with two stories that we're going to read this morning. Two stories, and again, this is going to be kind of a State of the Union, a snapshot of what life was like in Israel by the end of the time of the book of Judges. The first story is about Micah and his priest. That's in chapter 17 and 18. This story gives us a picture of the lack of respect in Israel for God and his laws of worship. It's mostly about the relationship between Israel and God, vertical, if you want to think of it like that. And the second story is the story of the Levite and his concubine in chapters 19 through 21. This gives us a picture of the lack of moral conscience in Israel, what society looked like on a horizontal level, how they interacted with each other as a result of their downward slope. Okay? So, let me turn back a page. Here we go. I'd like to play a game this morning with you. I think I mentioned this 2 weeks ago. Here's how we're going to read the first story, the story of Micah and his priest. If you've ever played What's Wrong with This Picture in a kid's magazine or a storybook or a coloring book or whatever, or the designer gives a picture, but there's a lot of details that are just out of place. You know, this is not where it should be, and a puppy dog is up at the top of a tree, and a bird is digging a hole in the ground, and there's a donut for the tire wheel, and just all kind of things. You're supposed to go through the picture and circle everything that's wrong in the picture. We're going to do the same game this morning. So if you like to mark in your Bible, that's fine, or if you've got a notebook, that's fine. As I read through this story, and I'm just going to read through it kind of verbatim, these two chapters, either in the margin by the verse, just put a little dot or a slash, or if you want to just make tick marks in a notebook somewhere, or if you want to count on your fingers and toes, whatever you want to do, we're going to play What's Wrong with This Picture? How many errors can you find? How many things are wrong in this scenario in terms of what the people do as compared to what God's law says? Is everybody ready to go? I'm just going to read this, and you guys count and see what you can find. Judges chapter 17. There was a man of the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah, and he said to his mother, "The 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken," read there, stolen, "that were stolen from you, about which you uttered a curse," I'll get that guy and I'll curse that man, "and also spoke it in my ears, behold, the silver was with me, I took it." And his mother said, "Blessed be my son by the Lord." And he restored the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother. And his mother said, "I dedicate the silver to the Lord from my hand for my son, to make a carved image and a metal image. Now, therefore, I will restore it to you." I'll give it back to you. So when he restored the money to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave it to the silversmith, who made into it a carved image and a metal image. And it was in the house of Micah. And the man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and household gods, and ordained one of his sons who became priests. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Now there is a young man of Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. And the man departed from the town of Bethlehem in Judah to sojourn where he could find a place. And as he sojourned, in other words, he's going to wander around till he found a good place to live. And as he journeyed, he came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. And Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" And he said, "I'm a Levite of Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm going to sojourn where I might find a place." Micah said to him, "Well, stay with me, and be a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, and a suit of clothes, and your living." So the Levite went in. And the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. And Micah ordained the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and was in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will prosper me, because I have a Levite as a priest." Chapter 18. In those days there was no king in Israel. And in those days the tribe of the people of Dan was seeking for itself an inheritance to dwell in. For until then no inheritance among the tribes of Israel had fallen to them. So the people of Dan sent 5 able men from the whole number of their tribe, from Zorah to Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to explore it. And they said to them, "Go and explore the land." And they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. And when they were by the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. Just out of curiosity, that must have been really weird. The guy's from way far away. He's clear up north. They hear a guy's voice and they say, "Oh, I know whose voice that is. I wonder if he had a really distinct voice or something." Anyway, it's irrelevant. We'll keep on going. But they recognized the voice of the young Levite. And they turned aside and said to him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What's your business here?" And he said to them, "This is how Micah dealt with me. He has hired me, and I've become his priest." And they said to him, "Inquire of God, please, that we may know whether the journey on which we're setting out will succeed." And the priest said to them, "Go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord." Then the 5 men departed and came to Laish and saw the people who were there, how they lived in security after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and unsuspecting, lacking nothing that is in the earth and possessing wealth, and how they were far from the Sidonians and had no dealings with anyone. They're quiet, they're peaceful, they're unsuspecting, they're minding their own business. Verse 8, and when they came to their brothers at Zorah at Eshtaol, this is the people from Dan, their brothers said to them, "What do you report?" They said, "Arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it's very good. And will you do nothing? Do not be slow to go, to enter in and possess the land. As you go, you will come to an unsuspecting people. The land is spacious, for God has given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is in the earth." So 600 men of the tribe of Dan, armed with weapons of war, set out from Zorah and Eshtaol, and came and encamped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah. On this account, that place is called Manath Dan to this day. Behold, it's west of Kiriath Jearim. And they passed on from there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. Then the 5 men who had gone to scout out the country of Laish said to their brothers, "Do you know that in these houses there is an ephod, household gods, a carved image, and a metal image? Now, therefore, consider what you will do." In other words, in this house over here, we saw the last time there's a bunch of good stuff. You armed guys, you know what to do, don't you? Verse 15, so they turned aside there, and they came to the house of the young Levite at the home of Micah, and asked him about his welfare. Now the 600 men of the Danites, armed with their weapons of war, stood by the entrance of the gate. And the 5 men who had gone to scout out the land went up, and they entered, and they took the carved image. Read there, stole. They stole the carved image, and the ephod, and the household gods, and the metal image, while the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. And when these went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the metal image, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Keep quiet. Put your hand in your mouth, and come with us, and be to us a father and a priest. Is it not better for you to be a priest to the house of one man, or to be the priest to a tribe and a clan in Israel?" In other words, you want to be stuck here serving over one guy, or you want to be over a whole bunch of guys? Do you want a promotion or not, is what he's saying. Verse 20, and the priest's heart was glad. Hey, this is a great opportunity for me. So he took the ephod and the household gods and the carved image and went along with the people. So they turned and departed, putting the little ones and livestock and the goods in front of them. And when they'd gone a distance from the home of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house were called out. In other words, Micah realizes what's going on. He calls out his neighbors, puts together a little militia, and off they go. And they overtook the people of Dan. And they shouted to the people of Dan, who turned around and said to Micah, "What's the matter with you that you come with such a company? Why are you chasing us?" they said. And he said, "You take my gods that I made, and the priest, and go away, and what have I left? How then do you ask me, what's the matter with you?" The Danites said, "Why are you following us?" And Micah said, "What do you mean, why am I following you? You stole me blind, you took my priest. Why do you think I'm following you?" Verse 25, the people of Dan said to him, "Do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry fellows fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household." In other words, you better be quiet, because there's some armed, angry men here, and we don't want anybody to get hurt. So you better turn around and go home right now. Wink, wink. Verse 26, then the people of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his home. But the people of Dan took what Micah had made and the priest who belonged to him, and they came to Laish, to a people quiet and unsuspecting, and struck them with the edge of the sword and burned the city with fire. And there was no deliverer, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone. It was in the valley that belonged to Beth Rahab. Then they rebuilt the city and lived in it. And they named the city Dan, after Dan, their ancestor, who was born to Israel. But the name of the city was Laish at the first. And the people of Dan set up the carved image for themselves. And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set up Micah's carved image that he made as long as the house of God was at Shiloh. Just out of curiosity, how many of you people were keeping track with pencil and paper of any kind? Anybody? Okay, probably. Okay, that's fine. How many of you were counting on your fingers? How many of you counted mentally? How many of you slept through that entire thing I just read? Yes, what a fine encouragement. That's excellent. Yeah, very good. Did anybody notice anything wrong with that story? You say, this is just out of, this isn't right. This is out of place. This shouldn't be happening. Anybody notice anything? Wow. Okay, I can spell it out for you if you want, but some of these things should be pretty obvious. Anybody want to raise their hand and shout out something they noticed? Funny, I was going to say that exact same thing. Yeah, she's exactly right. We'll come back to that. Exactly, right. Anybody else, can they name one thing? Lark.
Well, the mother got 1,100 pieces of silver back, said she was going to give it all to him for the God, and she only spent 200 pieces.
Yeah, first of all, she had this silver. It was stolen from her. She uttered a curse against them, which was probably not a fine idea. She got it back. She said, "Oh, it was my son. Bless you, my son. I will not punish you for this theft. Instead, I will praise the Lord, and I will dedicate the silver to the Lord." And so she dedicates it to the Lord by giving some of it back to him. He, in turn, uses this dedicated money to make an image and an idol, and he sets it up in his house, right? He sets up a shrine to worship at with this carved metal and this image, this idol and this statue, and he sets up a shrine in his own house as a place of worship for him to pray to this idol, and he institutes his sons as priests. Who were supposed to be priests? The Levites, the son of Aaron. Well, he said, I got sons here, so I'll make my own sons, who are not even Levites, let alone descendants of Aaron, but I will make them priests at my shrine to pray to the idol on my behalf, using the money that I stole from my mother, which I should have been cursed for, but instead she blessed me for bringing it back. We're not even 5 or 6 verses into the story, and there's so many things wrong here, I can't even count them all. Anybody else find anything? All right, nobody went. All right, I understand. That's okay, I can take it. I made a non-exhaustive list of things wrong with this story. There are more, but I got tired of writing after a while. But this is a solid start. Stealing from parents in chapter 17, verse 1. No punishment for that stealing in verse 2. Made a graven image, verse 3 and 4. Worshipping in other than the tabernacle, in other words, his own shrine and his own house, verse 4. He made ephod and idols, which is a solid no-no, in verse 5. Made his own sons, Ephraimites, as priests. There's a Levite looking for a home later in the story. Why is that a problem? A Levite says, I need to wander around and look for a good place to live. Why is that a problem? Thank you. They had designated cities where the Levites were supposed to live. So if he's wandering around throughout Israel in the hill country of Ephraim looking for a home and a place to go, that tells me one of two things. Either A, the Levite is completely disregarding God's law as far as where he's supposed to live, or B, conditions are so bad because the priests are supposed to live kind of on the contributions of the sacrifices of the people that come to offer sacrifices at what would later be the temple or now the tabernacle. So either the contributions are so poor and the living conditions are so bad in the Levite towns that he has to go somewhere else to find sustenance, which indicates the level of worship in Israel, or the Levite himself is in such utter disregard with where he's supposed to be at and what he's supposed to be doing that he's wandering around with his head in the clouds looking for a place to live. I don't know which it was. Either way, it's a bad story. Continuing on, looking for a home. The priest for hire. Does anybody find anything wrong with this? Hi, I'm a Levite. I'm hiring myself out as a priest. Does this not strike anybody as a problem? Yes, this is a problem. Priest for hire. Micah, he thinks he gets brownie points for hiring a Levite priest, which he shouldn't have hired in the first place, to serve at the shrine, which he shouldn't have, which features an idol which he shouldn't have, which is made out of silver that he shouldn't have stolen. You follow this? Here we go. Priest for hire, brownie points for hiring a Levite priest. Oh, God will surely look at me with favor now because I hired a Levite priest. Danites, they're looking for a home as well. God assigned them an inheritance. Why does it say an inheritance hadn't fallen to them? In fact, I think we read about this at the beginning of the book of Judges. Remember, they went up, they said, oh, these people are too tough for us. We have to go look elsewhere, because God can't defeat these people, so we have to look for something easier. Here's the story of what easier they found. They went instead of where God told them to go, they went down to a quiet, unsuspecting, peaceful people, and they said, let's just kill these people instead because, where God gave us is too tough and we don't think he can handle it. So they go down and attack an unsuspecting people. Where am I even at here? Brownie points, yeah, Danites looking for a home, yes. Stealing God's money. So they stop by Micah's house, and they say, hey, look at all these goodies. We're just going to steal it from him. So they're stealing things that Micah shouldn't have had in the first place to worship that he shouldn't have been worshiping, using money and silver that he shouldn't have had, and the idol he should never have made. This just gets better and better. He continues. The bribery of the priest. Hey, you're only priest of one guy. How about we hire you again to become the priest for us, personal priest again, which is no better, but you can tell he's materialistic and wants promotion anyway. The priest leaves Micah. He violates his contract and his agreement with Micah that he shouldn't have made in the first place. The threats against Micah, Micah goes running after the Danites, say, hey, you stole my illegitimate idols that I shouldn't have had, and they look back and say, hey, we're going to kill you if you object to our stealing your illegitimate things that you shouldn't have had. And so he makes them turn around and go back home. Again, the Danites attacked a peaceful and unsuspecting people. They set up their idols in Dan instead of worshiping at the tabernacle as they were supposed to have. And to cap it all off, did you catch this at the very end of the passage? Verse 30, the people of Dan set up the carved image for themselves. And who did they set up as priests for themselves up in Dan where they shouldn't have been worshiping, using an idol they shouldn't have had in the first place? Of all the things, who ends up being their priests up in Dan in this idolatrous, irreverent worship? Did you catch this? Who? Yeah, look at this. People danced up carved images for themselves, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, in ESV and I think other translations, a few of them. You might have one that says Manasseh. Does anybody have a? Okay. I have a footnote here that says some translations will say Manasseh, but Gershom was the son of Moses, so they think probably, another name for Moses or translation. But assuming Moses is the correct name there, of all the things, Moses, the servant of God, the lawgiver himself, the leader of Israel, and not 2 generations later, what are his grandkids doing? They're leading the idolatrous worship in a place they shouldn't have been worshiping, using idols they shouldn't have, which is made out of silver, which was stolen anyway, and stolen from another guy who stole it in the first place. And the grandchildren of Moses himself is leading this. Can you imagine what Grandpa Moses would have said if he knew this would happen? Moses himself is the one that looked at Israel and said, you are not able to be faithful to God. When you go into this land, you will turn away, and you will become idolaters, and you'll turn away from God, and he'll have to punish you. And sure enough, not only does Israel do it, but who leads the charge on this idolatry, at least in this area? His own grandsons. So, there's the rest of the list. So we started out by asking what? What's wrong with this picture? The answer? What is wrong with this picture? Everything is wrong. She said it down here exactly what I was going to say. It'd be a lot shorter list to count what's right with this picture, wouldn't it? Because you wouldn't have much of a list. Everything in this story is wrong. This is the state of worship of God by the time of the end of the time of the judges. It is so corrupt. It is so distorted, so messed up, so irreverent, so far from what it should have been. You can't even see. It's hard to imagine. How did we get to this place? And the answer is one step at a time, one cycle at a time, one bad choice at a time, one idolatrous decision after another at a time, and that's how we get here. What do you think of that? That's how it happens, isn't it? One step at a time. But wait, there's another story. Now let's read the story of Levi, the Levite and the concubine. I've always been curious when I read these stories. It talks about another Levite from Bethlehem. Is this the same Levite that went and hired himself out to Micah? I'm not sure. Personally, I think it might have been. We don't know. It doesn't matter. But just a curiosity to me. The story of Levite and concubine, chapters 19 through 21, that gives us a picture of the moral conscience in Israel. The first story we just read shows you what worship was like, and how idolatrous and how distorted and how corrupt it became. This one is about what society was like. And again, we're going to kind of play a game here, not a counting game. This is a where have I heard this before game. I'm going to read you again the story in chapter 19. At the end of the story, I'm going to ask you a question. Where have we heard this before, and what does this mean? Okay, everybody got it? Ready for the game? Here we go. Listen to the story. What other story does this remind you of? Chapter 19, verse 1. In those days there was no king in Israel. And a certain Levite was sojourning in the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim. Does that sound familiar? That sounds like the guy we just read about. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? And he took to himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. And his concubine was unfaithful to him, or some translations say became angry with him. We don't know why. Was it her fault? Was it his fault? Don't know. It doesn't matter. And she went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah, and was there some 4 months. She gets mad at her, I don't know if you call her husband, concubine guy, her partner guy, gets mad at him. She runs back home to daddy at her house and is there for 4 months. Verse 3, her husband, or whatever you call him, the Levite guy, he arose and went back after her to speak kindly to her and to bring her back after she's been gone for 4 months. And he had with him a servant and a couple of donkeys, and she brought him into her father's house. And when the girl's father saw him, he came with joy to meet him. Now I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. I have 2 girls. Let's say she runs off to become a concubine of some guy. There is a disagreement. She comes running home in tears, and the guy doesn't even bother to show up for 4 months. 4 months later, he shows up at my doorstep knocking on the door. What's my response? Probably not one of warm welcome and eager anticipation. And yet look at what this father does. Hey, great to see you. I'm so glad. Why don't you come on in? Why don't you just stay with me a while? It's a good time. I'm so glad to see you. Forget whatever it is you did to my daughter and ran off and made her a concubine of yours. This is great. Verse 4, his father-in-law, the girl's father, made him stay, and he remained with them 3 days. And so they ate and drank and spent the night there. And on the 4th day they rose early in the morning, and he prepared to go. But the girl's father said to his son-in-law, strengthen your heart with a morsel of bread, and after that you may go. So the 2 of them sat and ate and drank together. And the girl's father said to the man, be pleased to spend the night, and let your heart be merry. Let's keep on having a good time. It's so great to be here. When the man rose up to go, his father-in-law pressed him until he spent the night there again. And on the 5th day he rose in the morning to depart. And the girl's father said, strengthen your heart, wait till the day declines. So they ate, both of them, and when the man and his concubine and his servant rose up to depart, his father-in-law, and he keeps calling him father-in-law, technically not father-in-law, but you get the idea. The girl's father said to him, Behold now, the day is waning towards evening. Spend the night. Behold, the day draws to its close. Lodge here. Let your heart be merry. Tomorrow you shall rise early in the morning for your journey and go home. But the man would not spend the night. So he rose and departed and arrived opposite Jebus, that is, Jerusalem, before it was controlled by the Israelites. This is another city that they did not conquer right away. In fact, it took them roughly 350 years from when they entered the land until they finally conquered Jerusalem. Did you ever wonder why God took such a long time setting up his capital city and his temple in Israel? Maybe it's because the Israelites didn't bother to conquer the city he had chosen for 350 years, and then he could finally set up his temple. Maybe that's why. Anyway, side note, continuing on. He had with him a couple of saddled donkeys, and his concubine was with him. And when they were near Jebus, the day was nearly over, and the servant said to his master, Come now, let us turn aside to the city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it. And his master said to him, We will not turn aside to the city of foreigners, who do not belong to the people of Israel. We'll pass on to Gibeah. We don't want to go there and sleep with, where the foreigners are. We want to sleep with the good people of Israel, where we'll be safe. Verse 13, And he said to his young man, Come, let us draw near to one of these places and spend the night at Gibeah or Ramah. So they passed on and went their way, and the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. And they turned aside there to go in and spend the night at Gibeah. And when he went in, he sat down in the open square of the city, for no one took them into his house to spend the night, which was the custom back then. There were no motels. You take a traveler into your house. Verse 16, Behold, an old man was coming in from his work in the field in the evening. The man was from the hill country of Ephraim, and he was sojourning in Gibeah. He was just staying there for a while. The men of the place were Benjamites, and he lifted up his eyes and saw the traveler in the open square of the city. And the old man said, Where are you from? Where are you going? Where do you come from? And he said to him, We are passing from Bethlehem in Judah to the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, from which I come. I went to Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm going to the house of the Lord, but no one has taken me into his house. We have straw and feed for our donkeys, with bread and wine for me, and your female servant and the young man with your servants. There's no lack of anything. We have all the provisions. You don't need to give us anything. If you can just let us sleep in your house, or that'd be great. Verse 20, the old man said, Peace to you. I will care for all of your wants. Only do not spend the night in the square. Why do you think he said that? We'll see, won't we? Verse 21, So he brought him into the house and gave the donkeys feed, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. And as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, worthless fellows, surrounded the house, beating on the door. And they said to the old man, the master of the house, Bring out the man who came to your house, that we may know him. I don't think they meant let us bring a plate of cookies and see where he's from and how he's doing and shake his hand. That's not what they're talking about. Okay, if you have a more direct translation, fine. If you don't get it, look it up at home. Okay, verse 23. And the man, the master of the house, went to them and said, No, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Since this man has come into my house, do not do this vile thing. Behold, here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. Let me bring them out now. Violate them and do whatever you want with them. But against this man, don't do this outrageous thing. Can you imagine even saying that? Verse 25, But the men would not listen to him. So the man seized his concubine, which he just picked up from his father-in-law's house, who had already run away from him once, seized his concubine, shoved her out the door, and made her go out to them. And they knew her and abused her all night long until the morning. And as the dawn began to break, they let her go. And as morning appeared, the woman came and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was until it was light. Does this story sound familiar to anyone? And what story does it sound like to you? And why do you think God chose to put this story in the Bible right here? What are we supposed to see from this? Let's start with the easy question. Where have we heard this story before? Okay, I think from Genesis chapter 19, it's the story of Lot, or specifically Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Lot, in the first time around, it was angel visitors, but the situation is still the same. They go down, sleep in the square, don't sleep in the square, it's too dangerous. Guys surround the house, say, we want to get to know your visitors really well. They say, you shouldn't do this. Here, have my girls instead. They're worth much less. We don't really care so much about them. So they shove them out the door. They abuse them and use them all night long until finally at daybreak they say, all right, party's over. And she drags what's left of her body back to the guy's house and collapses on the front porch. This is the same thing that happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, not exactly. In Sodom and Gomorrah, it was angels. The angels said, enough of this. You're all blind. We're done with you. The guys dispersed by force. The angels drag Lot and his family out of the city. So it had a little bit different ending in Genesis. But the situation is that the society is the same. The situation, the storyline is the same. Only here, there was no angels with supernatural powers to make the guys blind. And the guys did what they wanted to the girl. Why do you think God puts this story here? Horrible story. Can you even imagine this situation? Why is the story here? Come on, you know this. Why is the story here?
Underscore how evil they were.
To draw a comparison and an equivalence between how Israel was behaving and the epitome of evil and wickedness, Sodom and Gomorrah. Everybody knows of Sodom and Gomorrah, how evil and wicked and immoral they are, so much so that God had to rain down fire and brimstone on them, blast them off the planet into oblivion so that they completely didn't exist. That's how wicked they were. Only Lot and his family survived. But you know who's behaving as every bit as bad as they were? Who is it of all people? It's God's chosen people. Israel, God's chosen people, who should have been living under the best legal system in the world at that time, given by God himself, the hallmark of order and compassion and caring and justice and righteousness. And this is what they become. They have become the very people that they shake their fingers at and wag their heads, oh, Sodom and Gomorrah, what losers, what poor moral people. They do the exact same thing. That's what Israel had become. Kind of. Why do I say kind of? Because this isn't the end of the story. It gets worse. Let's continue on. Where am I at? Oh, yes. Verse 26. As morning came, the woman came and fell down at the door of her master's house, where her master was until light. Verse 27. Her master rose up in the morning. Oh, I slept pretty good last night. I feel pretty nice and refreshed this morning, he says. And when he opened the door of the house and was ready to go on his way, behold, there was his concubine lying at the door of the house, just laying there on the ground, with her hands on the threshold, as if to say, please let me in. Verse 28, he said to her with compassion in his voice, get up, let's be going. After she's been abused all night long. But there was no answer. Why was there no answer? Why didn't she bother to respond? Because she was dead from all the abuse that she took all night long at the hands of all the town's guys. She's dead. Then he put her on the donkey, read there, slung her dead body over his donkey, and the man rose up and went away to his home. And when he entered his home, he took a knife, and taking hold of his concubine, or literally his concubine's body, he divided her, cut her up, limb by limb, into 12 pieces, and sent her pieces, all throughout the territory of Israel. And all who saw it said, such a thing has never happened or been seen in the day that the people of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak. This is an outrage. We cannot have this happen in Israel, they said. I'm not going to read the entirety of the rest of the story, but I do want to at least paraphrase it for you, just for time's sake. Here's what happened. The leaders of each of the other tribes of Israel receive in the mail a shocking package. What was in this package? A piece of the concubine with a note that said, here's what happened. We need to do something about this. So they all come together to meet. They all unify. They all bring out their armed guys and say, we cannot have this. The tribe of Benjamin has done something that we cannot stand for. So they all meet together and say, we're going to go down and attack this town and make them pay for what they've done. So they all go down to the tribe of Benjamin, the territory, and they say to the Benjamites, all right, stand out of the way. We demand you hand over these guys of Gibeah so we can punish them for what they've done. The Benjamites, and I'd say shocking, but maybe it's not shocking, say what? We're not going to hand these guys over to you. Who do you think you are? These guys are just fine. We're going to defend them. And so they go down to the city, but now they're fighting all of the rest of the tribe of Benjamin, who isn't willing to admit that what happened is horrible. And so they get into a battle between the rest of the tribes and Benjamin. Well, on the first day, surprisingly enough, Benjamin whoops the rest of Israel. They totally defeat them. I forget, it's like 26,000 or whatever Israelites killed. The next day they try it again. Benjamin starts winning again. 17 or whatever thousand, 18,000 more of them killed. So like 40,000 Israelite soldiers die here. And you kind of wonder, why was God allowing the Benjamites to win when they're the guilty party? And then you wonder, probably they're not the only guilty party here. Probably everybody's as guilty. There just happens to be this battle. Finally, the third day, they pray and say, all right, God, should we try this again or just go home? And God says, all right, today I will let you win. So he says, here's what to do, and he gives them a plan of attack that sounds a lot like, interestingly, and I don't know if there's an intentional correlation here or not, but if you read the military strategy here, it just absolutely rings of another military strategy we've seen in the past. It's the story of what? I know this is a tough one. Anybody know? Pretty closely, almost a lot like Ai. He says, go around, some of you hide in the back of the city, some of you go in the front. The ones in front, you run away. You'll draw the Gibeonites out of their city. Once they're out of the city, those of you who are hiding behind, you go and attack and burn the city, and then turn and attack, and we'll have them surrounded. Just like they did for Ai. And Ai, they had to do that because somebody disobeyed God, and they were in trouble because they got defeated the first time. They had to go back and do it this way the second time. Eerily the same, isn't it? They got defeated the first 2 days. Finally, they said, all right, I'll give them into your hand this time. Here's how you do it. The same way that you attacked Ai, just like when you disobeyed me back then. You're still disobeying me now, but here's how it has to turn out. So they go and they finally defeat the Gibeonites, and they just destroy them. In fact, all of Israel, or all of Benjamin, who was there fighting for Gibeah, they end up being defeated, and the rest of the tribes of Israel, all their massive army, just absolutely slaughters Benjamin. They go into all the cities, they burn all the cities, they kill everybody, men, women, children, everybody. They just wipe them out, all except for 600 soldier guys of Benjamin who sneak off and hide up at a little fortress rock some ways away. Well, they get done at the end of the day. Now, before the battle, they had gotten together and said, this is so serious. We're going to make a pact that anybody who doesn't join in this attack, we will kill them too. So if you don't show up and join in our attack on the Benjamites, we're going to slaughter you. They also made another pact, didn't they? They said, from now on, none of our guys are going to none of us will allow our daughters to marry any Benjamite whatsoever because they did it. So if this is how they're going to treat their girls, we're not going to give them any of our daughters ever to marry. This is unacceptable. So they made these vows to God, maybe before even completely thinking it through. Almost sounds like another judge that we've heard of, doesn't it? Who made another stupid vow and ended up paying for it dearly? Jephthah. Yes, Jephthah, you're correct. Right, I knew you knew it. Jephthah, he also made one. You know, if you give me victory, I'll slaughter the first thing that comes out of my door. And it was his daughter. So they made the vow. Well, they get done with the battle. The Benjamites lose, and they come to a stunning discovery. They're having their post-powwow battle victory celebration or whatever, and they realize, wait a minute, we just wiped out an entire tribe of Israel. We have a problem here. There are no Benjamites left. Oh no, they say, how could we have done something like this? It's almost comedic. 1 minute they're out for blood and revenge and they wipe out it, and then the next minute they're wailing and mourning over what they just did. This is terrible. We've wiped out an entire tribe. What do we do? We can't have an entire tribe missing from Israel. We're supposed to be the 12 tribes. Now we're only 11 tribes. Somebody says, wait a minute, there's 600 guys, soldier guys, who slipped out of the battle, went and hid up at a rock. So we're not completely out of Benjamites. But we have a problem, don't we? 600 guy Benjamites who have no wives to procreate with because we killed them all. They can't perpetuate a tribe by themselves. Obviously, you need some girls somewhere here to make this happen. But we've all vowed not to give our daughters to them as wives, and there are no Benjamite wives left. What do we do? So somebody said, I know what we should do. This is a good idea. Before we said that anybody that doesn't come to our tribal council, we will kill all of them. So is there anybody that didn't show up to our council? Sure enough, there was one town that didn't show up to the council. They said, I know what we'll do. We as an army will go up, we will slaughter this entire town, and we'll do just what we said. We'll kill all the men, we'll kill all the women, we'll kill all the children, except for, let's keep all the little virgin girls, because they would make great wives for the Benjamites, wouldn't they? And so they go up and they attack the city. They wipe out the guys. They kill all the men. They kill all the wives. Kill all the boys. Kill all the animals. But we keep the young girls alive so that we can take them back and give them to the Benjamites, these fine, upstanding citizens, as their wives. That's a good idea, isn't it? How would you like to? Yeah, doesn't that sound good? But there's a problem. After we attacked the city, we only were able to find 400 girls to kidnap after we killed their parents and give them to wives to these less than upstanding Benjamites. There's 600 guys, but only 400 girls. What do we do? Oh, this is still a tragedy. I know what we'll do, somebody said. Down at Shiloh, where, interestingly, the actual tabernacle was for quite some time. Down at Shiloh, every year they hold a festival. They call it the Maple Syrup Festival. And during this festival, they have a ritual thing where everybody gets out and dances for joy, and it's a great time. And all the kids and everything. But among these, the girls come out and dance as well. So you last 200 Benjamites who have no wives, here's what you do. You are to go hide in the bushes along the road where these girls are going to come and dance and have their festival. And when the girls dance by you, you sneak out of the bushes, you kidnap one, and take it for yourself. Voila, you have a wife. Isn't that romantic? Isn't that great? And here's the best part, because when the townspeople come out and say, hey, you're kidnapping our girls, give them back. We don't want you to kidnap our daughters. They'll say, it's for a good cause. It's for the Benjamites. And besides, you're innocent of the vow we made because we can't give them our daughters because we vowed we couldn't. You are not giving your daughters because we kidnapped them from you. So you're not guilty of breaking the vow. They get their wives. We didn't break our vow because we didn't give our girls. You didn't break your vow because you didn't give your girls because we stole them from you, kidnapped them, and gave them to these Benjamite wives. Now everybody's happy. Isn't that great? And the story ends like this. Oops, hang on. The story ends in the end of chapter 21. Well, verse 24, chapter 21. After they did all these things, it says, and the people of Israel departed from there at that time, every man to his tribe and family, and they went out there, every man to his inheritance. They all agreed this was an okay idea, and they all went home. And the last verse of the story and the last verse of the book is what? Verse 25, it says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. How would you like to live in a society where everybody does what's right in their own eyes, where the opinion of the mob rule is the law of the land? We're getting closer to that here, aren't we, by the way? Just a kind of a side note, we're getting closer to that here in our country. We still have laws. We're not anywhere quite near as bad as these guys were, but we're getting away from God's law. But think of the law they could have had. They were the outstanding, shining city on a hill country. They had the best law, and this is what they've deteriorated to. God's law disregarded, everybody does what's right in their own eyes, and this is the kind of stuff that happens. Starting with Sodom and Gomorrah, and it just goes downhill from there. They are 3 stories below Sodom and Gomorrah at this point. I said, here's what we have. Twice in these stories, in chapter 17, verse 6, and chapter 21, verse 25, says, every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Why? They were doing what was right in their own eyes because they weren't doing what was right in God's eyes. It's one or the other. And you can see where their own eyes led them. But that's not really the ultimate root cause, is it? It says why everybody did what was right in their own eyes. In fact, this phrase here is twice throughout the stories. There's another phrase that shows up twice as many times, 4 times. And it says why they did what was right in their own eyes. Why? Because 4 times because there was no king in Israel. There was no centralized government, which they really needed, right? God brought them into the land, but they didn't have a government. They needed a king. They needed laws. They needed soldiers. They needed police guys. They needed somebody to maintain law and order. They needed Donald Trump to just swoop in there, law and order guy, bring in the National Guard, stuff like that, keep everybody safe. They needed a king to lead them. Yes? There was no king in Israel. Question: was the problem really a lack of a king or a lack of leadership? If so, when they finally ask for a king in 1 Samuel chapter 8, why does God try to dissuade them? If they needed a king and everybody did what was wrong because they had no king, and then they ask for a king, we want to be like all the other nations around who has a king and an army, and God says, I'm not sure you want to do that. That's not a good idea. Why doesn't God want him to have a king? I see a hand in the back.
God was their king.
Yeah.
We recognize him as king.
Oh, ho, 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 yes. The problem wasn't that they didn't have a king. They had a king. They had the best king ever. The creator of the universe was their king. So in Samuel, when they ask for a king, what they're really saying is, God, we reject you as king. We don't want you to be our king. We want a people king so that we can be just like everybody else. And according to the story, guess what? They are like everybody else. They've turned to their gods. Their pagan, idolatrous ways have come out. Violence, greed, selfishness, inconsiderateness, hostilities, they all reign under the rule of the day. They are like everybody else. To top it all off in 1 Samuel, which we'll get to soon, they say, well, we might as well just have a people king to be like everybody else. Well, guess what? You're like everybody else. And how's that working out for you? Isn't this pleasant? Isn't this great? Living at a time like this. Ladies, I said the book of Judges focuses on kind of the plight of the ladies throughout the book. How would you like to live in a time like this? Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be grand? It'd be horrible. It'd be rotten. It'd be violent. You'd be afraid for your life all the time. So the reason that there was no king in Israel is because Israel had rejected their king. That's why. That's why 1 Samuel 8:7 says, they have not rejected you, speaking of Samuel, God says, but they have rejected me from being king over them. Gideon, for one moment, had it right when he said in chapter 8, verse 23, I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. For one brief, fleeting, flickering moment, that was the right answer. Of course, they didn't follow it. They didn't implement it. They didn't abide by it. But that was the right answer. That's what should have happened. God was to be their suzerain king, the lawgiver, and the people were supposed to submit to him and have an orderly, just, fair, righteous, compassionate society. And they turned away from it and they rejected him as king. And that's how the book ends. But wait a minute. If you remember 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I know it's been a long time, I said, this book is about the dark ages of Israel, and it's horrible all the way throughout. But I do promise you one thing. What? I promise you at the very end, I will give you a... Does anybody remember? Nobody remembers? Wow, you're making me feel so bad today. You're really not helping my ego at all here. At the end of the book, I promise I will give you a bright spot at the end of the book. I promise it will end on a better note. But we got to the very last verse. Where's the better note? Where is the bright spot at the end of the book? I will give you the bright spot at the end of the book next week because we're out of time. But I promise it will come, okay? Let's pray and we'll dismiss. Dear God, we thank you this morning again for this book that's hard for us to read. What a horrible, tragic end this people, well, not end. What a horrible, tragic place these people came to, all because they disregarded you and your laws. If they'd have only stuck with you, their society could have been such a shining example to all the surrounding nations. And in fact, they became as bad and even worse than everybody around them. I hope we take this to heart. And even though we see even our own society degrading in many ways, we do pray for mercy as much as possible and justice and judgment when you see fit. Help us to recognize decay for what it is and the reason why it happens, because we do what's right in our own eyes instead of following your word. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Next week is the bright spot at the end of the book. You're dismissed.